Hello and good evening. Good evening. Happy Sunday, everybody. I am glad to be here today. Another week full of grace. Can't complain. I'm so excited again. This time of year is very festive time of year. But also just enjoying everything that's really going on. A lot of good things I can't wait to share with you. I hope you guys had a good week. I hope you had um, some good things happen. Always praying, hoping that good things happen for you, and I hope your families are doing well. I know everyone is sort of in a mode of preparation, and again, just happy to be here. Happy to be on tonight. So, um, I wanted to continue to have our conversation about heart talks, specifically about a new topic. The last three sessions I did, it was on resentment. So if you didn't get a chance, please go back and listen to the last three episodes. I talked about resentment, and I just basically shared some things about, if you have resented or maybe currently, you resent your child for just anything. Just basically, if you are blaming your child for things in your life not going well or whatever, or if you are resenting parenting at some point, if you have, or especially now, if you are experiencing more of that, how to deal with that, what really happens during that time, because these conversations are built around the idea that if you're struggling to connect with your teen in any way, then there's an issue. And as parents, we are the ones to take the lead to mend broken fences, to really just reestablish that connection, or in some cases, to even build that connection. Maybe it just hasn't been there. Sometimes, parents struggle to even have a connection period with their child. So now, if they're in the teen years, it can be a really bigger struggle because now they're breaking away. They're trying to establish independence. They're trying to, you know, they're becoming more autonomous. They have their own thoughts and opinions about things now. So trying to, you know, get that connection or form that connection with them now, if it wasn't hasn't been one established already, would be really hard. It would be really hard. And so I've been having these hard talks with parents because I wanted to share some things that really focuses around building connection, or in some cases, like we did the last three episodes, things or something that can hinder that connection. And I was thinking about tonight, and I wanted to talk about unforgiveness. Unforgiveness is a major thing. A lot of times, there are things that happen in life, and it feels as if, you know, you've been, it doesn't even feel it as much as you've been wronged. You know that someone has done something to really offend you, to really make you angry. Someone has disappointed you. Someone has taken advantage of you or did something against you, right? And so you get angry and then you don't forgive them. And I wanted to talk about unforgiveness because that is an area where I struggled with so much. And I'll just share this from my heart. As many of you know, I have talked about, parenting alone and single parenting because my daughter's father didn't help me. And I was angry for a very long time because I just couldn't understand it. How could we have this relationship and then all of a sudden now, we have a baby and it's like you don't want to, be a part of that process of parenting. You don't want to be a part of her life. You don't want to help. And so for years I struggled with anger and unforgiveness. And it really blocked me in a lot of ways. And I wasn't even really aware of it because I think I was just so caught up in the fact that, he just didn't step up and didn't want to step up. It was like he just didn't care. And I couldn't imagine. I'm like, how could you not want to be a part of your child's life? Like in my mind, I'm thinking, dude, what's wrong with you? What's really going on? And I could never really have a conversation with him about it because he really couldn't, I guess, answer the question. I don't even think he really knew. And he was really aware of the effects of this. And so it really left me very bitter, very angry for a long time. And I used to look at my baby and look at my daughter and think, she's so beautiful. Oh my God, this guy's a jerk. He's just, I don't even understand. Like, it's like a totally different person than the one that I dated and her father. And so, what I didn't realize, they were one and the same. And so, I know Joyce Meyer, I don't think she coined this phrase, but I think she may have. But hurt people hurt people. And so, I finally begin to understand that. And what I was really angry at and why I really couldn't forgive him was because it just didn't click to me, that, he had his own issues and things that he had to work out. And so for me, it was like, okay, you left me. Now I'm doing all of this and it's a struggle and everything. And so I found myself just saying, you know what? He's just bad goods. I'm going to leave it at that. But every time I would think about it, I would get angry and, the thoughts would come and I would just say, man, I wish, that someone else would have been her father, somebody who really would see her and love her and see the beautiful child that she was. And so for years, I had felt like that. And I was like, Lord, I need help because this is the area where I'm struggling. Right. And so as she became a teenager, I didn't even realize how much that had affected me. And, I was there for her, just being supportive. But I think that was like a wall or something. And again, it was because, now 15, 16 years later, I'm still having these feelings. I'm still struggling in this area. And now she's, being a teenager and she wasn't thank God she wasn't like, you know, a really bad teenager, but she went through a lot of bullying and so she needed a lot of support. And I just felt like we weren't seeing eye to eye. And I'm trying to say, well, you know what, you got to stand up. And I'm trying to give her all of this advice and all of this. And it just, she heard it, but at the end of the day, it wasn't for her, to really be, you know, like going at it or fighting back and doing all that fighting and stuff in school like that. Just not who she is. And so, you know, at the end of the day, I begin to understand. I'm like, I have to forgive her father. I have to forgive him because I felt like she really needed both of us at that time. So it was like he still wasn't around. He still, you know, wasn't showing up. And so I had to let it go. And I said, Lord, I need help because I just can't do this, right? And so at the end of the day, after a lot of prayer and crying and why, and, I had to forgive myself. And thank you, Lord. I had to forgive myself for, just the fact that, I picked someone, and, you know, it wasn't a mistake because my daughter's not a mistake, but I picked someone and it didn't work out. So I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive myself, and I felt like, in some ways I had done my daughter wrong because it was like, I chose this person who, wind up not stepping up. And so it was really hard for me. And, I think towards the latter part, right before high school and graduating, I began to, really release and forgive, and just really, just recognize that, what he wasn't there to do, God had stepped up to do. And so the thing about unforgiveness is sometimes we feel that what has happened is unrepairable, right? We feel like, it can't be, fixed, or whatever was lost, we cannot get back. But that's not true. Christ, when he died on the cross, he died to get everything that was taken and robbed from us to restore it back. But we have to be willing to receive that. And we have to be willing to forgive. And that forgiveness and willing to say, you know what, I forgive you. You missed the mark. 18 years, I was doing this, 19 years, and you missed it. And I release you from that. And that helped me because it helped to build my connection with my daughter. I didn't even realize, I was thinking, you know what, she needs both of us. And I'm trying to do the best I can, but I was afraid. I wasn't really, you know, um, I want to say I wasn't really emotionally just like really sure that, I can handle things like her feeling the way she's feeling, and, not really wanting to fight back in school, and, and then it affecting her academics and stuff like that. So, I believe that that unforgiveness on my part kind of hindered me really connecting with her in such a way. And I wasn't even aware of it. It didn't even really even dawn on me because I wasn't aware it was an issue. All I knew was that, her dad wasn't around. And yet again, when I need him, when she needs him, he's not there. And so that was the reoccurring thought all the time. And then after a while, it just became that was the thing. And I had to really just say, Lord, I need help in this area. My daughter's going through, and I feel like I really can't be there for her the way I want to. I really need him to be there because I had never really dealt with this kind of issue. I never really dealt with, bully in that way. I mean, like it was really taking a toll on her and affecting her academics. And I was just so mad at him because I'm like, maybe if we can, come together, like you can meet her after school, or, you know, um, be a means of support in case she needs to call you. And all I kept thinking is all these things that we could do to kind of help to support her, but he wasn't there. And so that added on to those feelings, and it sort of solidified and justified my unforgiveness. It was like I have a right to, because you're not doing your part, and just that blaming of you're just not being there and being her father, and she needs you. You know what I'm saying? She needs your support. And then that would just cause me to be angry and stay in that angry state. And then it's like towards the end of, I want to say, her senior year, towards her senior year, that last year, things changed. You know, she overcame a lot of things. She was able to, graduate, and, and it was just a difference. And I felt like we had really overcome this. But it was at a point where it was like I was just emotionally exhausted. And at that point, it was like, you know what, he's never been there, he's not going to be there. And that's it. I think I came to the realization that it was never really about him. It was about me trusting God and believing God. And him not being there the last 18 years was evident. But I had to come to that realization that I was angry and everything. But again, it wasn't at him, it was what I thought things could have been if he had been there and more supportive. And so, I wind up really connecting with my daughter the last year of her senior year. And, and it just, things just got better. Like, it was like a breath of fresh air. And, she had managed to overcome some things. She had managed to, with her own relationship with God, she came through it and she began to blossom. And I was so thankful. And I realized, you know what? It was all God. God was there to help. He was there to do all of what I needed. I just had to rely on him. But I had to also recognize that my daughter's father was not my source. He was not, the source that I needed at the moment. I thought it was because I'm thinking I'm the mother, he's the father. So there is that, responsibility on both of our parts. But in reality, it wasn't him. Like he wasn't there, he wasn't going to be there. And so I finally accepted that, but with that acceptance came the forgiveness. It was like I just realized for whatever reason he wasn't there, he didn't want to be there, and I had to accept that. And I began to release that. I began to release him. And in that, that's when my connection with my daughter really began to blossom. Um, because I'll be honest, I think that when you, especially in a case like this where there's parents and the other parent may or may not be there or whatever, but when you have that unforgiveness, it really does block and hinder you from having a connection, not just with your children, but from people, period. It blocks you from really, experiencing the love of God in a very powerful way. And, I have to say that, at the end of the day, I thank God for the fact that I had the experience of knowing what it's like to really depend on God, for Him to really be my source and my strength, for Him to really protect my daughter and really take care of her in that way, especially during this time of bullying and things that she was going through in school. And so it was Him. And so, I finally got over it. Like, I finally really got to that point where I was able to release it. And from that point on, again, my relationship with her went to another level. And it was like she understood, and we had to have conversations, for her not to take it personal that he wasn't there or he wasn't as supportive. But she learned, even through that experience, who God was for her. She learned, and that was the most powerful thing, that she learned who God was, and she had that experience, and it was amazing. And I remember her sharing, some things with me about it, and it just really, I kind of exhaled, at that moment, because it was like, okay, she knew to call on God, she knew to pray, she discovered rather how to really lean on God and lean into God. And I was like, Lord, I thank you, because it could have been something different. And I'm thankful at this point in time where I can say towards him, I don't feel anything at this point. I always prayed that things would go well with him. And so I'm just grateful to the Lord. I'm grateful to where He has brought us to and from. And I'm just thankful. And I wanted to share that because, maybe you have a teen, or maybe you have unforgiveness towards the other parent if they're not involved. Maybe you have unforgiveness towards your child because for whatever reason they keep doing things. Maybe they keep getting locked up. You keep having the school keeps calling you, right? Maybe you're hearing things in the streets. You coming home from work and people and your neighbors and they like, girl, let me tell you, and you hearing things and you're not liking what you're hearing. And you may know it's true, right? You may know because you've been experiencing this with your son or your daughter, and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this kid, you know? And in that moment, you can be angry, but maybe you haven't forgiven them for putting you through hell or stealing from you or lying or cheating or getting locked up. Maybe something has happened. And I have to tell you that forgiveness is key. I know it may be hard because forgiveness was hard for me because it was like, listen, I had to make the same sacrifice you're making, right? But we have this child now, and there's no turning the clocks back. So let's do what we have to do. Let's love our child. Let's, make sure she has the best life, better than what we had. It was a no-brainer for me, but not for him. And maybe that's, you know, where you are with your team. And I have to tell you, you're gonna have to let it go. You're gonna have to pray and you're gonna have to let it go. You're gonna have to release that because you can't love and have unforgiveness. I'm telling you, you cannot. You can't love and be offended. You can't love and think your teen doesn't know it. Even though you can be nice and warm around the house, you can't have both because that unforgiveness, that anger, those feelings will manifest in some way. And we speak to people not only verbally, but with our body language, right? We speak to people through our actions, okay? And so people, they can pick up, especially our kids. If they live with us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they know. They know when we're angry with them, when we don't really want to be bothered or we don't really like them in the moment. They know it. But that they can deal with because that's a momentary thing. They didn't do the dishes, now you got an attitude. They can deal with that. They didn't take the garbage out, they didn't clean their room. They can deal with that. They're just like, mom is tripping. I'm gonna clean up my room so she can stop tripping and bugging out. But unforgiveness is totally different. Unforgiveness is like a silent wall, an invisible wall, and it does block you from giving love because you can't love in that state. You can't. Um, that was a struggle for myself to love. You can't love when you're angry or when you're at that point. And so you don't know why. You're trying to figure out, like I don't even know why. But it's unforgiveness. And I just want to encourage you that that's something you're going to have to address. You're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to, come to terms with the disappointment or whatever that your child may have caused you and know that they're not going to be like that forever. You have to trust and believe that the prayers that you are praying, that God is hearing those prayers. He is going to do something if he hasn't started already doing something to, get resolution in that area to help your team to be better. He may be sending people in their life through school or activities after school, people who can mentor them and begin to talk to them to get them back on that straight and narrow. But I want to encourage you that if there's unforgiveness there, you need to deal with the unforgiveness. The unforgiveness is key to really, you know, um, dealing with, or rather, if there's a connection problem, emotionally connecting and loving your child, that unforgiveness is something that will definitely hinder that. And it can rob you. It can rob you of time. It can rob you of, um, uh, it can rob you of time. It can rob you of, and time is our most precious commodity, right? And so you don't want that gap. It's like a gap. If you don't forgive, that gap just keeps getting bigger. And it feels like as though you don't even want to be bothered with your child. You may have even thought about giving them up or letting them go live with the other parent. Unforgiveness will constantly bridge that gap, will constantly increase that gap until you're so disconnected, so not, loving them until you don't even care what happens. You just want them gone. And you don't want to do that. You really don't. As frustrated and angry as sometimes that we can get with our kids, you just don't want that. That's a decision that you don't make in the heat of the moment. And so I'll continue this next week. Um, I want to share some tips on how to help you to overcome that. But first thing I'm going to tell you, it's going to require that you want to forgive. And sometimes that's the hardest thing about forgiveness is wanting to forgive, is wanting to release that person who has done something. And I remember the Lord showing me that as long as I didn't forgive, it was like I was holding my daughter's father as a prisoner in my heart. And every time he did something, it's like I just added more time to the sentence. Oh, he didn't come through. He failed again. It's another 10 years. It's like holding him in jail in your heart. And I was like, that's why you feel like you're carrying it all the time. That's why you feel angry all the time because you're holding it in your heart. And you have to let it go. You have to trust God. And trusting God is usually, in Christendom, it's like a cliche term that I hear people say, but that process means I totally, totally look to you in regards to this situation, that I trust that your way is the best way. And I'm going to believe it like a blind faith. I'm just going to believe that your word, the Bible says, forgive. Because you've been forgiven, we ought to forgive. I'm going to trust that word, that process is true. And so that word will go to work on my behalf. It will help me to soften my heart towards my child. They're giving me hell right now, but I forgive them. And in that forgiveness, I can love them. And in that love, I can support them. And in that support, I can be their champion and I can root them on and say, yes, yes. Yeah, I can't, you can't look at what they've done in the past and keep bringing that up because that's a vicious cycle that the devil loves. Oh, remember when they stayed out to 4 o'clock in the morning and you got to work late and your boss wrote you up because you were up all night worrying about them? The devil loved that, bringing that. those memories and those thoughts of everything that they did back to you in that moment. And you just get angry and you're like, oh my God, you may even start cursing. And I can't believe this. And now they doing it again. You have to cast that thought down. So, nope, I love my child. You have to quote the word. I'm going to give you some scriptures to quote because the scriptures, I'm telling you, the Bible works. It worked for me. I was like, let me find something, let me find a word to encourage myself. Let me find a word to declare. But you have to deal with the unforgiveness and you have to know and trust that everything is going to be okay. It never seems like it when you're in the moment and you're going through it. It never seems like it. It seems like this kid is never going to stop. Like they've been giving me such a problem for since they were 12 or 11. It's time for you to find out what's going on. What's the root of that problem? But your unforgiveness is a key to overcoming that. It's a key to loving your child past the things that they do. And so that's all I have for you tonight. I will see you next week live right here at 8 o'clock on YouTube at Parenting After Dark. I hope that you have a great week ahead. Um, I know that there's a lot going on in the world. Stay encouraged. Don't just, do things blindly. There is some voting going on now. So just choose wisely, pray, and ask God to show you, like, Lord, who's the best candidate? Do your research, look to see what they've done and some of the things that they have supported or they plan to support and make a wise decision because it's so important. Have a great week. I hope that all is well. I hope that you have a great week this week. Take care. I will see you next week right here on YouTube live at 8 o'clock at Parenting After Dark. Have a great one.